This is the reconnected.me podcast, and I'm Lucy Lichtenstein. On this show, I chat with some of the most beautiful people about everything from nutrition, sleep, nature and mindset, to self-love, connection, following your bliss, and the bigger picture philosophies of life. Basically anything that relates to living consciously and reconnecting to our true nature. This is a safe space that welcomes all perspectives, opinions and ideas. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi guys, before we get into the show today with Darryl Edwards from primalplay.com, I just wanted to let you know about Darryl's Animal Moves program, which he does mention towards the end of the show, but if you'd like to find out a bit more information about that, you can head on over to www.reconnected.me/animal moves. That's ANIMALMOVES. And if you use that link, you can actually receive a 10% discount off the total price of the program. So feel free to check that out. I'm actually going to be doing the program myself very soon. And in previous Primal Play sessions that I've been to of Darryl's, he always incorporates some type of animal movement. We can learn so much from the way that animals move. They use their whole bodies. And really, if you think about it, animals move exactly how they were designed to move. Whereas human beings don't necessarily do that. We don't really know how we're designed to move, and many of us we're learning that now. But there's so many different types of exercises and activities and sports that sort of take us further away from our natural design of how we were supposed to move as humans. And so, being able to train, as Darryl says, train like an animal. Can sort of help us to get back to using our entire bodies and doing, different types of movements that can help strengthen us and improve our balance and our mobility and our posture. And these are all the types of things you can expect to help in this program. And, some people even find that they might even lose a little bit of body fat during that time. It's a 30-day program, and, it doesn't have to just be 30 days. It's things that you can take into your everyday life and, make a part of your movement practice. I highly recommend it. So definitely check that out. And I will be documenting my own experience doing this program on the blog with, a few different blogs just talking about how things are going. And I'll probably record a separate podcast about this as well. So stay tuned for all of that. And also, at the end of the show, we forgot to mention where you can find Darryl on social media. So on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, you can find him at Fitness Explorer. And his other website is also www.fitnessexplorer.com. And Darryl also has 2 books, so Paleo Fitness and Paleo from A to Z. So highly recommend checking those out as well. We will have all the information in the show notes so that you don't have to write anything down. And for now, enjoy the show with Darryl Edwards.
Hi everyone, welcome to the reconnected.me podcast. This is Lucy Lichtenstein, and you can find me at www.reconnected.me. Today I've got a very special guest on the show for you here. It's Darryl Edwards. And Darryl is an author, a speaker, a nutritionist and a coach. He's also the creator of the movement modality Primal Play. And really, in my opinion, Darryl is a movement genius. We actually met about, I think it's 3 or 4 years ago now maybe, at one of Mark Sisson's Primal Con health retreats over in Lake Tahoe in the States. And Darryl basically took us all through one of his Primal Play movement sessions, and I hadn't sort of been exposed to his work before, and I found it super inspiring and really, really fun, and it really changed the way that I think about movement in so many ways. And since then, I've been to a couple of Darryl's Primal Play sessions here in Sydney. And I wanted to bring him on the show today because his approach to movement and health in general is incredibly important, I believe. And, I really support what he's doing and believe in what he stands for. So I'm really excited to share this conversation with you also. Darryl, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, you're welcome, Lucy. Thanks very much for the invitation and the great introduction.
Oh, beautiful. No problem. So do you want to share with us your story, Darryl, for those who may or may not be familiar with you?
Okay, so firstly, I have to say that I hate exercise.
I love that you said that. I love it because I was good. Yeah, I feel the same. But yeah. Go ahead.
I hate exercise, but I do love movement. I do love to move. And my backstory is that I worked within the corporate world as a technologist within investment banking, and had a wonderful time. It was a very lucrative career. It was very rewarding, but there were some downsides, and one of the downsides was I was sedentary for 16 to 18 hours a day, every single day. I was on call pretty much 24/7, so I had very poor sleep and interrupted sleep patterns, and it was highly stressful. So the stresses of just feeling that I'm still going to be in a job tomorrow, because it was very cutthroat environment, and secondly, it was just so demanding. I mean, you felt the pressure of being responsible for systems that could lose or gain millions of pounds within seconds. So that was a significant amount of responsibility, making sure those systems were running optimally. And I had an annual health check one year, which revealed that I was suffering from sort of chronic lifestyle issues, high blood pressure. I was pre-diabetic. I was anemic. I had elevated risk of cardiovascular disease, and all of this was due to my lifestyle. I didn't know, I wasn't aware of that at the time. The solution given to me was to take a cocktail of medications, pharmaceuticals, and I was just so scared of the side effects and the long-term or lifelong dependence on these drugs. I was like, I need another way out. So I came across a book that I'd read previously, a help guide, as I call it. I bought this book, put it on my shelf, didn't read it. A couple of years later, I went back to it and it was called The Paleo Diet by Lauren Cordain. And it resonated with me because of this back to basics approach to eating and a species appropriate diet. So, it discussed why humans evolved to eat a particular range of foods, and if we deviate from that, it's one possible reason for the sickness that we're facing today in the modern era. And it then opened up a few more doors for me to say, well, okay, if there is a way that we should be eating as nature intended, then there are also other things we need to look at, such as movement, such as fitness, such as physical activity. And that started my journey, really, getting into this known as the ancestral and evolutionary model for health, and it's worked really well. Within a few months, I'd reversed all of those issues I discussed previously. I was no longer pre-diabetic. My blood pressure normalized. My heart disease risk became normalized, optimized, and it was like, yeah, I feel as if I can continue on this path, and fortunately without any meds to date. So that's how I started investigating how lifestyle change, how better nutrition, how better improvements, a better approach to sleep, a better approach to movement could improve my health.
Wow, beautiful. So you initially at the beginning there, you said you hate exercise. So can you talk to us a bit about your view on movement versus exercise? Because I tend to agree with you.
Yeah, so I suppose exercise is a supplement or a substitute for the lack of physical activity that we encounter in our day-to-day lives now. So our ancestors, and even going back a few generations, movement was more key to our days. Our occupations were more labor-intensive, our housework was more labor-intensive, and going back thousands of years, we had to hunt and gather our foods, we had to build our own shelter, we had to be responsible for our community. So movement was key to survival. Nowadays, everything is about convenience. We have labor-saving devices. We have devices that make life more convenient, so we don't have to move. We can live sedentary lifestyles and still have all of the pleasures that we need. We can order our foods online. We can engage in whatever entertainment we want without movement. The downside is we're living increasingly sedentary lifestyles, and so one possible antidote to this is you can join a gym. You can take part in an exercise program. You can do some resistance training and some aerobic training, go for a run. You can do classes. You can buy magazines that are devoted to fitness and exercise. And we're all aware of the benefits of not being sedentary. So we're aware that sitting is the new smoking and that living a sedentary lifestyle leads to poor health. So we have this option, which is, okay, what you can do is exercise 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week, do a gym session 3 times a week, and then you'll improve your health and you'll improve the way that you look and you'll feel better. So we're aware of this. The downside is, just because there are significant benefits being physically active, not many of us are choosing to be physically active. We're not choosing to work our way through our exercise program. We start our exercise program and then we give it up in a short space of time. We have a New Year's resolution to get fit and healthy, and again, within a few weeks, the majority of us decide to go back to our old ways. And I feel one of the reasons for this is that exercise is almost alien to us. It feels uncomfortable. We were designed to conserve energy. So to actually exercise just for the sake of getting fit just doesn't make sense to us from a physiological point of view. There has to be a purpose for doing so. So we might create, we may do a run for charity, or we might decide to set some short-term goals, like I want to drop a dress size, or I want to look a certain way, and that might be our short-term goal. But that doesn't get us to think about movement for years, for decades, for the rest of our lives. It doesn't become a habit. Movement doesn't become a habit. So that's what I feel personally the problem is with exercise. It's painful, it's punishing, it's about no pain, no gain, and the harder you work, the better the results. Whereas with movement and physical activity is something that you have to do to get by during your day. And you have to choose the kind of more difficult path,
Yeah.
So you decide, I'm not going to take the lift, I'm actually going to take the stairs. I'm not going to take the bus, I can walk a mile to get to commute to work. I can get on a bike and commute to work. I can spend time playing with my kids rather than telling them to play on their iPad. You can actively decide to become more physically active, and that reduces the need to exercise in quotation marks, as long as you're engaging in the right types of movement. And the right types of movement are those that we were designed to do, the movements that nature intended us to partake in. And so we should be running, we should be climbing, we should be jumping, we should be crawling, we should be lifting people, we should, lifting things, we should be carrying things. We should be sprinting at pace, we should be spending more time walking. So if you engage in all of these movement patterns, you'll become healthier, you'll feel better, your body will respond by, all of those epigenetic signals that come through movement. You will have better mood. You'll be less likely to be anxious and depressed because there are mental health outcomes through physical activity and movement. And so that's what I'm trying to push, and that's what I advocate. So exercise works well for those who are motivated by exercise, those who are motivated by wanting to train like an athlete, those who have a short-term goals that they can smash, highly competitive, highly motivated individuals. If you're not that type of individual, like myself, and you want to have a movement practice that you can continue for life, then you have to find something that's enjoyable and rewarding and engages, probably within a social, some sort of social practice. we are social beings. So getting involved with other human beings and taking part in movement, or if you have a pet, going for a walk and actually, rather than just letting your dog go off and run, actually spend some time playing with your pet. If you have children, engaging with your children with movement. If you have a community who want to also move in this particular way, find something that you enjoy and that is rewarding and fulfilling, and just make sure that you're engaging in the widest possible scope of movement practice available, i.e. we're movement generalists, and so that's what we should work on. We're not specialists when it comes to movement. We're generalists, and one of the issues that we have with fitness is that we want just one area to work on. I want to become a runner, so I'll run more for greater distances in a shorter space of time, rather than thinking, actually, I should be flexible and mobile and strong and have agility and coordination and good balance. Yeah. So that's really my approach now, thinking about how I can integrate more movement into my day, less sedentary time into my day, and almost a well-formed plate or template of movement. So rather than just having, eating one meal, the same meal every single day at a set time, I'm thinking about how can I make my meal choices even more varied when it comes to movement. You know what I mean? How can I almost have a smorgasbord of movement choices that I can pick from that will make my life more rewarding? So I hope that's a pretty long explanation.
No, that's
but
great.
I hope that gives you.
Yeah, well, it's almost like you're saying, with all these different types of movements that we should be able to do as humans, these are movement nutrients, aren't they? Like our bodies actually require, these particular inputs to be healthy. And, it also seems as though we've kind of outsourced our body's natural movements that we were designed to do, and the way that we were designed to move, to so many different types of convenience. So I think it's like, I feel as though the more that we keep evolving with, especially I think in this whole sort of technological space, the less there seems to be a need for us to actually move. Like we can, we sit down for a lot of the day at work, not everyone, but a lot of us. We commute to work sitting down. We get home and we sit down. We're in social situations and we sit down, and, it's definitely, I like how you said it's about finding ways to move throughout the day, and it doesn't need to be anything crazy. Like you said, it's like, you could go for a walk if you're, maybe talking to someone on the phone, or maybe at work you could have walking meetings instead of sitting down in a chair. Like, there's definitely opportunities if we're just aware of looking for them in our day.
Yes, that's a very good point, and I do like the term kind of outsourcing. We've basically engineered movement and physical activity out of our lives, and that's not just individually. That's our towns and cities have done so, our workplaces and our schools have done so. I live in a building of 2 or 3 floors and stories, and people are taking the lift. Very young individuals are taking the lift just for two flights of stairs. And I'm like, it's just ridiculous. I mean, well, I don't want to say ridiculous, but it's a concern that people can't spend 2 minutes to walk up a couple of flights of stairs because they feel, it's better for them to use the lift. Wait for a minute for the lift to come down to that floor, because they've had such a hard day being sedentary. Which is usually the case for many people. So, we have to make the decision to become more active, and I think it's easier if you just try to introduce some movement snacks, some additional movement minutes, so whereby you don't feel bogged down by, I've got to do another 1 hour gym class again, or I've got to get all my gym gear sorted out, and I've got to get into my car to drive to the gym, and then get changed, and then actually spend only 20 minutes of activity to get changed again, and go into the spa after and the sauna. So I feel for myself, I try to integrate more movement by having, I have a standing desk. I decide, if I've got a remote control and I'm watching TV, I'll bear crawl along to get my remote control. I'll sit in a squat during commercial breaks. I'll think about ways I can become more active and just kind of rolling around on the floor if that's what it takes for me to do so. And if I'm out and about, so for example, I remember years ago where I would go for a run. I'd put my training shoes on, I'd get changed, and I'd go for a run, and I'd run in a straight line for a few miles. And I could never do that now. If I was going to go for a run, I would have to interact with my environment. I'd have to, I'd see a tree. I'm like, okay, I'm going to climb the tree. I'm going to do a couple of pull-ups. I'm going to, so there's a grassy area. I'm going to crawl on the ground. There's spaces for me to jump. There's a balance rail for me to balance on. So now I think far more about how I can use the real world around me as my gym, rather than just getting into another indoor space and probably sitting down on some gym equipment or walking on a treadmill. I can actually take those movements into an environment which is more conducive to movement. So that's what I propose, and that's what I advocate. And pretty much all of us need more movement, more nutritious movement in our lives.
Absolutely. And I think, it was probably came from you that sort of made me see that the world really is our playground. It's kind of like what you just said. You're kind of using your environment, your outdoor environment, as your own gym. And if we can go a bit further and talk about play here, Darryl. So, Primal Play is your movement methodology. Can you give us a bit of a rundown about what that is and how it's benefited you?
Yeah, so when I got into fitness, into exercise, as I said, it didn't motivate me. It became very boring. I got injured, and it certainly wasn't fun. So the process wasn't enjoyable for me. The end result was pretty good. I looked better. I felt better. I felt great at the results. I can lift this heavy weight. I can now run for a mile without getting out of breath. Isn't this fantastic? But the process of getting there was pretty painful. It was mind-numbing. I remember when I first started using my MP3 player, and thinking, oh wow, I've now got 500 songs that I can listen to. I'm never going to get bored when I go for a run. And it doesn't matter how many tunes I had on my MP3 player, there still was never enough to
I agree. I used to do the same.
I was still bored.
Yeah.
So when I started to think about how I could make exercise more fun, fitness more fun, I thought about when I was a kid. I thought about how I would play with my friends for hours and hours on end, especially during the summer, those endless summer days, which would never end until your parents said, come back in for dinner. But we didn't exercise. We went out to play, and we had lots of games that we played, and it was always interesting. It was very rare that we were bored because there was nothing to do. We created new games. We got on our bikes and explored our neighborhood. And I wanted to recapture some of that as an adult. And I recognized for me that was going to be the way that I could enjoy physical activity for the long haul. And so Primal Play came about based on that. One, trying to recapture the enjoyment of movement that I had as a kid. And secondly, thinking about these primal natural movements that we should be engaged in, but making them more accessible. So a lot of movement systems, I feel, sometimes cater for the elite. They cater for those who just want to challenge themselves, and it looks very fanciful. And if you dedicate your life to movement, you can perform these amazing physical feats. But most people, the average Joe and Jane, they just want to feel great about getting out of their chair. You know, they just want to get out of bed without having aches and pains. They want to be able to play with their kids without getting out of breath. They want to be able to feel good about their movement practice and not be competitive and not feel as if they have to take off their T-shirts and have a six-pack in order to do what they do. That's the reality. And so the fitness community and conventional fitness and even some of the movement systems that are out there, I think they cater for athletes. They cater for those who have great physical literacy, who look really good, who feel great about exercise. And then you have the majority of individuals who feel great being sedentary, who want to just, and I know that because I was one of those individuals. I actually felt great just coming home and sitting on my sofa. And that's why I felt great, you know. And I felt great at the end of a gym session, usually. But that was 60 minutes of not enjoying myself. You know, I had to wait an hour before I was like, okay, the endorphin rush has kicked in. Now I feel great. But life's too short to, you know, be in pain for an hour.
Yeah, agree.
Several times a week.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, like why would
wow,
you do that to yourself,
now.
really, if you think about it, right? Like, why would we put ourselves through this stuff? We're supposed to enjoy life and things that we do, yeah.
Exactly. And so if we reference our hunter-gatherer past, then we can recognize very, very easily that they moved because they had to. So they would conserve, you know, their job was to conserve energy. They wouldn't want to waste calories unnecessarily. So it was used primarily for obtaining food, capturing food, bringing that food back to camp, preparing food, gathering food, scavenging food. That's what our main drivers were for survival. Let's go and grab some food. Then there's movement that occurs with reproduction, which is hopefully enjoyable practice. There's the movement that comes, recreational movement that comes, say, from dancing, and those rites of passage that occurs. So there's the movement which was mandatory, which you had to do in order to survive. There was also the movement that came about through recreational enjoyment. And so now our recreational enjoyment when it comes to movement tends to be, let's beat ourselves up. You know, let's have a really hard time punishing our bodies because, oh, I ate that cream cake last night, so today I'm going to actually beat myself up in the gym. And we hate the process, you know, most of us, or many of us do. So I'm like, why don't we just think about those movements we had to do? Let's do those now, but let's encapsulate that with fun and enjoyment. So I do want to engage in those natural movements. I'm not going to go out and become a hunter. I'm not going to become a gatherer, but I can engage in some of those movements. I can mimic some of those movements. And secondly, I can wrap all that up with some fun and play. And that means rather than waiting 60 minutes to enjoy my workout, I can have instant gratification. And 1 minute in, I'm like, oh, this is so much fun. And I'm laughing whilst I'm getting out of breath. And this feels difficult, but it's enjoyable. So I'll continue with this. And I can get fitter, I can feel better, and I'll get all of the benefits from physical activity without the pain.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what, just from having experienced your Primal Play sessions, the enjoyment aspect of it almost kind of makes you don't feel like you're actually getting benefits from moving. Like you're moving, but you're having fun at the same time. So it's kind of like you don't even have time to think about, you know, you don't realize that you're moving, but you are. And, you know, there's many benefits that are going on with that, not just because you're moving, but because you've got that social interaction and, you know, there's many things going on in the body when that happens too. So kind of combining those two things, I think it's genius. And it's, I definitely have noticed it's very accessible as well because you've got young kids that, you know, are there, and then you've got, you know, adults up to the age, I don't know what the oldest that you've got now, but I know you had maybe like 70 or 80-year-olds maybe, was it? Or
yeah, so I've had adults, well, I've had kids up to 94,
Wow. Yeah. Well,
take part in Primal
yeah, I
Play.
like that.
So
yeah.
I don't discriminate by age. But yeah, I think it was designed to be accessible.
Yeah.
It was designed to be inclusive and some equalization to occur. So, it's like dogs play fighting. Dogs don't square up and say, "Oh, sorry, you're not the same size as me, so we're not going to play."
Yeah.
I've seen a boxer, dog, and a chihuahua play fight, and as you know, they're worlds apart in terms of size and physical capabilities, but they can still play fight. They create this play contract, which means for the next few minutes we're going to play. We're not going to hurt ourselves, but we're going to make sure this is all out fun. And humans have lost that ability because we're constantly trying to size each other up. We're constantly trying to make sure that we have the right weight classes. If we play tag, we've got to make sure it's we both weigh 70 kilos and we're both the same height.
Yeah.
got the same hairstyle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
So and kids, kids do this really well, whereby siblings will say, a 5-year-old sibling and their older, say, sister of 8 years old, they'll make a decision like, okay, you've been piggyback carrying me for a while. I want to see if I can do it. Yeah. They want to challenge themselves. They want to see what their boundaries are and what their limits are. And so they won't go, oh, well, you're 8 and I'm 5, so there's no point even attempting this. They'll say, let me try this out. Let me see if I can do this. And if I can't, I'll try again. At another opportunity. I'll use another opportunity to do this. So that's the natural environment for us to challenge ourselves. But as adults, we want to make sure everything's fair.
Yeah.
And as we know, the real world isn't fair.
Yeah.
But play can equalize without patronizing ourselves and our experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, adults can learn. Okay, you said kids before, but we can really learn from watching what kids do and how they play. I mean, they don't seem to have fear, and as you said, like these different types of conditioning going on. So, do you want to go a little bit further into maybe like what can we learn from? What else can we learn from watching kids play, and how important play is for all of us?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I've seen this reference recently quite a lot of saying, look at kids, look how kids move, look how they squat, and there is something, there's some validity in that. But I now feel, and I used to subscribe to that myself, but I now feel that's a bit of a misdirection because surely our kids should be learning from us.
Yeah.
The rest of, can you imagine a big cat looking at, their offspring and going, wow, I'm going to learn how to hunt. I'm going to learn how to move by watching my little cubs move. Yeah. I mean, no, that's not how it works. The cubs actually look at their parents and say, wow, that's how I want to move when I'm older. That's how I want to actually behave when I'm a big cat. And so we as adults should reference our own childhoods. We should look at our own history when it comes to movement, and that's what we should be referencing. How was it for us when we were kids? How did we engage with our peers? How did we develop our movement skills? And sometimes it wasn't always fun. We were, I'm trying to think of an example. Yeah, learning to ride a bike, for example. It wasn't fun, me learning to ride a bike. You were scared of falling off. It was challenging. You wanted to impress in my case, I wanted to impress my dad, who was teaching me to ride a bike. I wanted to get the stabilizer wheels off, and do it myself. that's the reality. There was a struggle involved and some progress involved in trying to attain that movement ability. That's the reality. And then there was some enjoyment when you realize, oh, now I can ride a bike. Now I can do these tricks. But it isn't just comfortable, and it isn't just all fun right away. Yeah. There is some development that occurs. And so as adults, I think we should appreciate that fact. We should reference what our kids are doing, but only because that's what we did when we were kids. And I think we should be taking charge of the experience that our kids are having, i.e., sometimes we should allow them to free roam a bit. Sometimes we should allow them to have some of the experiences that we had as kids. But unfortunately, a lot of parents are saying, no, we're going to helicopter parent. You're not going outside. You're not going to be given those opportunities to spend time playing all day because we're really concerned about your safety. And so children are just not armed in the same way that we were. They're no longer, they're not streetwise. They're not aware of risk assessment. There are more kids, here's an interesting stat, there are more kids who fall out of bed and are admitted to A&E or ER than there are children falling out of trees nowadays.
Yeah, I believe that.
So that's an official stat from the US and in the UK, that there are more kids admitted to hospital falling out of bed than there are falling out of trees. And, there aren't as many kids climbing trees now. Yeah. That's one of the reasons. Right? But the fact that kids are falling out of bed and being admitted to hospital because they can't even fall out of bed safely. They have no rough and tumble ability. They have no limited body awareness. So they can literally twist an ankle falling out of a bed, a meter off the ground, which is, again, it's alarming that that's the case, that kids have this so little physical awareness and physical literacy nowadays. Very, very sad.
Yeah, very, very, very fragile, I think, is what's going on. Like, as you said, they're not equipped to be able to do many of those things. But I like how you said that, really kids should be learning from what we do, and we really should be those models. It's so true. I suppose there's an element of both. Like, we can kind of look to them and, as you said, like kind of remind us of our own childhood and what we used to do. But really it's us who, you only have to kind of observe kids to kind of, or even just be, have a conversation with them, and they're always looking at what we're doing, and they're possibly copying, or we need to kind of really look at that. We should be modeling their behavior, and we know if you look at psychology around mimicking adult behavior, if you have a regular, if you're into fitness and you regularly go out for walks and runs, for example, and you take your kids out with you, they're more likely to be into fitness when they're older. Yeah. This is what happens. If you're cooking really healthful foods at home and you're spending time in the kitchen and you're preparing meals and you invite your children into the kitchen when you're preparing meals, they're more likely to do that when they're older. Even if they deviate for a while and just eat fast food for 20 years, they will remember those seeds that were planted, and they'll gravitate back towards that. So yes, there's nothing wrong with observing our kids. There's nothing wrong with reminding ourselves. That's probably more important. We should be reminding ourselves and reminiscing. That's how it used to be for us. Yeah. That's how much fun we had when we used to move, and we want to encourage that. And continue to encourage that in our children rather than dampening their enthusiasm. So that's the difficulty. It's like you encourage your kids to move. Oh, I can't wait for my son to take his first step. He's now walking without any issues, without assistance. Oh, now he's running. Now he's starting to climb on the sofa. And then you start saying, actually, no, the sofa's not for climbing. Yeah. Don't jump on the chair. Don't stay in your chair, stay in your high chair. Don't leave the room. Don't play with that, whatever it is. Don't explore.
your environment. So we encourage them, we delight in their successes, and then we start telling them to conform.
Yeah.
And so we kind of dampen their enthusiasm. And the amount of kids, when I'm running classes, even for adults, I'll be running classes in my local park, and the amount of children, they're walking with their parents, and these kids will just turn around, do a 180, and kind of go, "What are those adults doing? You know, why are they doing the stuff that normally, you know, that other adults aren't doing? You know, why are they crawling on the ground? Why are they playing these games? Why are they piggyback carrying each other? Why are they doing this?" And you know, you can see that's what those kids want to do, and a lot of parents won't allow them to do so. So it's gone almost full circle, where these kids are seeing adults playing games with Primal Play that they instinctively know that's what they should be doing right now, rather than, do you know what I mean, walking behind their parents on a scooter or something like that, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like
absolutely.
Yeah. So something missing, you know, they're not quite sure what it is, but then they see it and they go, Mom, Dad, that's what I should be doing, and should we all be doing this?
Yeah.
You know, no, son. I'm too old.
Yeah.
I'm too old to do that.
Oh, no, I know. It's almost like there's this innate thing within us, whether it's, you know, you're a child or an adult, it doesn't matter, and that, you know, it's kind of suppressed in a way for all these years. Like, we're not able to fully express and explore these movements and these different things to kind of make us robust as we move through life. And yeah, it's kind of sad to see, but I mean, lucky there are, you know, people like you, and there's more, you know, awareness around this. It's growing. There's a lot of, you know, other people sort of, you know, talking about similar things. But yeah, it's good to see, you know, the awareness growing, for sure.
Yeah, I think for sure there's a lot of people in this space, whether it's in all forms of health, that are referencing and taking a serious look at how human beings, you know, why human beings are here, and what we had to go through in order to be here, and the fact that we are part of the animal kingdom and we are part of nature. You know, we're not isolated. We're not islands in this kind of the ecology, you know, of this planet. And so once you start really seriously thinking about that, the world becomes a better place. You know, you become more environmental by default. You start thinking about your source of food and animal welfare, and you know, how you can better treat the environment and how you can pollute the environment less with toxins, and use plastics less and petrochemicals less, and think about the things you put on your skin, and you know, and how you should be improving your sleep, and how you should utilize technology appropriately to ensure you're healthier. So I feel that for me, diet and fitness were the gateway into me thinking about this holistic approach to health. And movement, for sure, is definitely one of the fundamentals. In my opinion, it's probably the most important facet of health. Not given much its due reward, but I feel that if you can't move in a traditional sense, you wouldn't be able to do any. I mean, you just wouldn't get access to food. You know, there was no internet delivery service available. Do you know what I'm saying? So as important as food is, how did we obtain those perfect choices of food in the past? How? Somebody had to do some seriously hard graft in order to get that food. It just wasn't available in that perfect macronutrient ratio. You know, it wasn't. You know, we had to be opportunistic. We had to eat whatever was available. You know, and we had to do whatever we could to obtain that food source. So I feel we just like, we need to reprioritize based on nature's prescription. And if we really start thinking about nature's prescription, we'll be healthier as a result. You know, very simply, in a simple way as well.
Absolutely. That's kind of a lot about what I talk about with, reconnect.me is nature, and looking at nature for the answers, and actually sort of asking those big Your questions and what is our true nature as humans and maybe beyond that. And yeah, I always find that when you can look through the lens of, you know, a more natural and holistic approach to life and to health, and that, you know, we're part of this larger ecosystem, it's where we came from, it's who we are, and as you said, it allowed us to survive, to live in this environment that we were designed to live in. And yeah, I think it's super important. You know, there's this whole thing about you know, as we age, you know, we're going to be less mobile and not able to move as well as we did when we were younger. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what you think about that?
Could you rephrase that?
So, you know, like this whole thing about, you know, just aging and becoming more fragile and being less mobile and, you know, not able to do things that we did when we were younger. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a very good point. So, I suppose, you know, there is definitely going to be a point where you're going to feel the effects of aging.
Yeah.
You know, but I think most of that is due to less use of those kind of faculties, movement faculties. So, you know, we tend to lose our flexibility as we age. We lose strength. We lose mobility. You know, we have less stamina and endurance in comparison to when we were younger. And I think the modern lifestyles probably accelerate that process of aging, and that period of mobility has expanded significantly, because we're kind of told, oh, you're a certain age now, you know, you're 60 years old, you know, you need to start settling down and you need to start kind of like, don't worry, I'll get your tea for you. You sit down and take it easy. You've had a hard life. And so those societies that your duties continue regardless of your age, those older adults move really, really well. They seem to have less issues with lack of flexibility. They seem to have less issues with their balance capabilities. They still look really lean and athletic, relatively athletic, in comparison to their younger peers. They look very similar. So that's what we need to learn from our cousins in the ancestral world, you know, in the hunter-gatherer world, is that they have a short compression, what's known as compression of morbidity, i.e. they live long. If they get past the issues of infectious disease and death at childbirth, if they get past that stage and they live into adult life, they can live just as long as we do in the West, but they don't spend 10, 20, 30 years suffering and having poor quality of life and having a lack of independence. They still tend to go out and hunt and gather and, you know, actively involved in raising the generation or two after them. You know, that's what they do. So they continue to move. And I feel that we fear aging. One of the reasons being is that we don't actually continue to do what we did when we were young. So we set ourselves limits and we set ourselves barriers to aging, which are, I can't do that anymore. You know, I've lost that ability. I'm starting to gain weight. My balance is starting to suffer. And rather than thinking about how can I maintain my balance ability, we just decide to feel as if it's inevitable. So there are things we can do as we age. We can try to maintain our lean muscle mass, that we can try and maintain our balance capability. We can continue to maintain our mobility, so we don't just all of a sudden seize up and then struggle to get out of a chair. I suppose we have to fight. You know, there has to be a point where we actually start to fight to maintain what we developed when we were younger, rather than just deciding, enough's enough and there's no point. So I don't know. I hope that's answered that. But I feel for myself personally, I don't fear aging. But I do think about longevity.
Yeah.
And so longevity for me is not just about extending my years on the planet. Longevity is about maintaining for as long as I can my youthfulness and the exuberance and the vitality that I have now. And even in my mid-30s, I remember feeling older before my time. Do you know what I mean? I remember thinking, why am I having these aches and pains? Why do I feel as if I've got no energy when I get up in the mornings? Why do I feel just awful? You know, why do I just feel like fatigued constantly and lethargic? I should be in my prime right about now, you know? And I was able to regain that, you know, into my 40s, I was able to regain what I'd lost in my 30s. And so I want to maintain this now going into my 50s and 60s and beyond. That's what I want to maintain. And I feel that all of us have that capability of almost not only reaching our potential, but also holding on to that for as long as possible. And most of the loss is due to us not doing stuff, you know, using it or losing it. That's really what it's about. Yeah, so that's what it's about. And if you think about physical activity and say cognitive function, so it's something else that, you know, that we also fear is losing our mental faculties as we age. But there's a great association between our movement function and capability and our cognitive function. So the older population who go out and dance, who learn new movements, who are working on their balance and coordination and agility, those adults are less likely to suffer from Alzheimer's and dementia. You know, so movement is a medicine, not just for the physical body, but also for the mind and for our cognitive function as well. So it's almost common sense. You know, it's like, it makes sense. If you go out dancing, you're going to be more social. You're obviously less likely to be lonely, and you're going to be improving your coordination, and you're going to have some tactile touch, and your brain develops significantly. You create new brain cells during that process. Neurogenesis occurs during that process. So if as a younger adult, I'm actually engaging in new and different forms of movement and exploration, I'm also creating brain cells. I'm also maintaining my mental faculties longer and developing new brain cells and reducing my risks of dementia and cognitive decline. So there's lots of great evidence, and it's the sort of stuff that I discuss on my website, primalplay.com, where I talk about some of this evidence base around movement and why it's so powerful and potent, a potion almost for better health. It isn't just about, hey, let's just burn some calories and get out of breath and leave it behind. It's like, no, it's every single cell in your body is affected positively by movement.
Absolutely. Well, we were born to move. Let's put it that way. And just going back to what you said about, you know, you wanting to sort of continue your state of health, you know, throughout your life as you get older. It's really about the quality, isn't it? It's not about the quantity. It's about, for the amount of time that you're here, you want to be able to, you know, do those things that are involved, you know, going through life, and you want to be healthy. You don't want to, you know, be, you know, sick with, you know, some kind of health issue, and you don't want to be immobile, and you don't want to have injuries and all these types of things. It's really about the quality of life in those later years and throughout our whole life, really.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We can't foresee what's going to happen to us, and I have no idea what the dice are going to roll and present to me as I get older. But I can at least know that I can be in the strongest position possible. I can definitely work on reducing the risks. Yeah. So that's what we can do. You know, I know if I drink you know, a liter of a fizzy drink, of a soda drink every single day, I'm likely to get diabetes. I mean, you know, I'm likely to become obese. It increases the likelihood. It doesn't mean it's definitely going to happen, but it increases the likelihood. So I know by not having a liter of soda every day and making better food choices, I'm reducing the likelihood of type 2 diabetes. So that's how I approach the decisions I make in relation to health. It's not about guarantees. Yeah. It's about a reduction and mitigation of risk. And I still want to have some enjoyment. You know
of course,
what I mean? So
yeah.
I don't want to be a monk. I don't want to be living in a commune in Tibet, living this kind of perfectly healthy lifestyle. I want to take the best of my ancestral lifestyle and the kind of ancestral wisdom and integrate it in the present. I want to use my smartphone and I want to use social media, but I don't want those devices and the internet to become the most important aspects of my life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to blend the best of both worlds, and I feel that's probably the advantage of living in the 21st century. We do have access to all this information. We can listen to podcasts. I can read your amazing blog posts, which are great, by the way. So, we have those options available to us, but at the same time, we have hundreds of thousands of years of history and prehistory that we can call upon and say, what about our experience, our communal experience as human beings on this planet, can we call upon to make life better for me today? What foods should I be eating to maintain good health and prevent and reduce the risk of disease? We have a reference that we can call upon, and it's extremely arrogant of us to believe that just because I live in the 21st century, I can ignore everything that went on in the past because everything today is better. That isn't, as you know, that isn't always the case. So, and we pay the price when we try to sidestep nature. I remember thinking I was a night owl. I convinced myself that I was more creative at night, and I didn't feel alive until 1 a.m. I had that second wind, and I was a musician for a while. I have an album out, and so most of my creative time musically was after midnight, between 1 a.m. until probably 5 a.m. I was the most productive, and so I convinced myself that was the best time for me to work, and there was a reason, because I'm a night owl. Of course, as we know, that was one of the worst things I could have done in terms of my health. I wasn't getting good quality sleep. Even if I was sleeping during the day, it's not the same as me sleeping at night. My, melatonin, serotonin balance, was imbalanced. Everything was out of whack. My cortisol levels were out of control. I was irritable. There were so many issues, side effects of that, just because I wanted to convince myself that nature was wrong.
Yeah.
Why should nature dictate when the sun goes down?
Totally.
Yeah. But of course, now I realize how important it is to try to resynchronize myself with nature and getting to bed at a decent hour now, and rather than trying to rebel against my circadian rhythm. So there's lots of lessons to be learned, and unfortunately most of it is really, really simple.
Yeah.
Just obey the laws of nature. In most instances, nature's got it right, and it has done for millions of years.
Absolutely. There's so much traditional wisdom to be learned that we can definitely apply within this modern context. It's definitely it's interesting because I've heard this whole thing about how there's so much technology and it's just going to keep on advancing, which it is, but I think we've got to be able to just accept that and run with it and just find ways to help it utilize, to help it utilize being healthier, and to like going back to what you were saying before, in terms of being a night owl. I've written about that on my website, and when we're doing all these out of design or not by nature's design, that's when we sort of start to see all these issues. So yeah, definitely nature. Sure.
Yeah, for sure. And technology should be assisting us to or fast tracking our ability to actually go back to nature. So that's what it should be enabling us to do. And one way I look at this is, if I'm spending, so for example, if I'm spending all my time listening to podcasts or reading blog posts at midnight, and I'm saying to myself, oh, wow, I'm just getting all of this education teaching me how I should sleep, teaching me about sleep hygiene at 1 a.m. Isn't this amazing? It's like, well, actually, no. Actually, stop reading. You don't need to know anymore. You just need to go to sleep. And I think
exactly.
know what I mean? And it's as simple as that. Don't be distracted by the temptations of technology. When I remember when I was a kid, and we used to think about the year 2000, and the year 2000 when I was a kid in the 70s was like this mystical world of, there'll be flying cars, no one will be working anymore, there'll be so much more kind of time spent for recreation, because we won't have to work. We'll have robots working for us and doing all the menial chores. And what's happened is we don't have more time for recreation. We're working harder than ever before. We're working more. We're more stressed out. Even though we have all of this technology and all these labor-saving devices, life isn't better for us in terms of us having more fun and enjoying free time. We're now spending our free time trying to actually do even more, get even more stuff done. Even more likely to be doing more work because we're getting our emails 24/7 now, and we're chained to our desks for longer than ever before. So I thought about that recently, whereby it was like, as a kid, that's what we thought about. Like, one day we'll have all these robots doing everything for us, and we'll just be able to do whatever we want. We can travel the world. We'll be able to enjoy ourselves. And unfortunately, it's gone the other way. So we've got to find a way of making the best use of technology, which improves our health and improves longevity and helps us manage our relationships better, which is great for those who live across the world. Look at the fact that we're talking on Skype.
Absolutely.
In the UK. Imagine how much that would have cost to do.
Oh my goodness. I know.
It would have been impossible to do. So there are definitely advantages, but we need to take stock that we don't let that become our prime motivators for life. They're just tools. They're not replacements for us living a healthier lifestyle.
I think it just comes down to sort of being aware of your usage and just kind of using it in a sensible and mindful way, as you mentioned. So just before, Darryl, you mentioned about movement in general, affecting every cell of our body. I'd love it if you're able to share a little bit about maybe what's going on in terms of our gut health and movement and play, because there is so much information out there now about gut health. It seems to be kind of like the buzz thing that's going on at the moment. So, what kind of effect does movement and play have on our microbiome and our gut health? What's going on there?
So I'm aware of a couple of studies. There's one interesting study that was undertaken with rugby players. And so they basically compared a rugby population with an average population control group. And they saw that the rugby players had more diversity and greater volumes of gut flora, beneficial gut flora. And so the assumption after that study was, it's probably because they have better nutrition. They're more likely to have a nutritionist and a chef on staff, and so that's probably why these individuals have better gut microbiome. And so the next study that took place was actually just looking at rugby players, and these are professional rugby players. So I looked at professional rugby players, and they split the rugby players in two. One, and what they did was they realized that the fitter the individuals actually undertook more fitness, spent more time being fit, I should say, spent more time training, actually had those who had a greater VO2 max, which is a measure of your aerobic capacity. So the more aerobically fit you are, they saw that there was a corresponding increase, again, in gut flora diversity and in more greater volumes of health-promoting bacteria. And so the more diverse your gut flora, there's a reduction in disease risk. You have a better immune system. You're less likely to suffer from hormonal imbalances. So that's what the evidence states. My personal feeling is that, one, it is great that the fitter you are, the more aerobically fit you are more likely to have beneficial bacteria. But secondly, I feel that soil-based organisms, which is one of the real kind of buzzwords within the buzzword of the microbiome, is the bacteria that your organisms you're in contact with when you're interacting with nature. So, a rugby player spends lots of time on the ground. If I go outdoors to play, I'm kind of crawling in the ground. I'm getting access to a whole plethora of microbiome that has, I come into contact with. So I feel that there are benefits of exercise alone that improves the gut flora, and I think there's obviously some interaction with our oxygen capacity, or our capacity to process oxygen, and I feel that some of that is actually benefits our health-promoting bacteria. So I think that's one association. And the second is we're probably just more likely to be spending time being active outdoors, means you have more contact with soil-based organisms. So some of the best probiotics you can buy, some of the best evidence-based probiotics are based on soil-based organisms. So that's my kind of theory as well as some evidence behind that association.
Yeah.
Get outside, play, and you'll have more gut microbiome. Oh, I almost forgot to mention.
Yeah.
If you're interacting with other human beings, if you're playing games like tag, if you actually have some tactile, some contact with other human beings, again, there's exchange of, the microbiome.
Yeah.
Every time you touch someone, there's an exchange of bacteria. Sometimes good, of course, sometimes bad if you have an infectious disease. But most of the times, you're not in contact with people who have infectious diseases, so you are transferring some microbiome, which stimulates your immune system and is likely to make you more resilient.
Yeah.
So those are probably the three reasons why movement, physical activity, and play in nature are going to improve your gut microbiome.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes so much sense. We seem to be very focused about gut health and the microbiome as it relates to the food that we eat, but there's not as much about the other lifestyle things such as movement and sleep even, and so many of the things that we do in our lives have an effect on that microbiome. So it's super interesting to hear about movement in that way. But yeah,
it's for sure, and I do have that evidence, that research on my website. So I do have an article on the microbiome and movement. Yeah. But we do as humans want to have one silver bullet. Yeah. We want one solution.
Yeah.
We want to know that the reason the whole planet is sick is just because of our gut microbiome. Yeah. That's it. That's the solution. And if we improve that by having fermented foods, then everything's fine. But if only life was that simple.
Yeah.
Think about it this way: most of the planet, especially most of our ancestral heritage, didn't rely on fermented foods.
No.
Those in the African savannah don't have sauerkraut.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or kimchi. So, so it's like there had to be other ways of us to develop our microbiome and to maintain good gut health. It wasn't just because we had access to probiotics from a a supplementary store, or the fact that I can make kombucha and sauerkraut. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So that's the way I try to look at things now. If somebody tells me there's one solution, there's one answer to any of our problems, I kind of go, yeah, that sounds great, but what else is there?
Yeah.
What are the exceptions? Why can that not be the only answer? So as you say, I feel if our gut microbiome, which was there prior to human beings,
Yeah.
they were there prior to us, our time on the planet, which means they didn't just come about based on fermented foods once again.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah, totally.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
it's like they were, part of their evolution would have been their access to oxygen as a source of kind of fuel, as a source of energy. Anaerobic environments, i.e. the lack of oxygen, would also be part of that. So it's obvious then our ability to live aerobically and anaerobically as human beings is part of what happened for the microbiome well before our time. So there were so many areas that touch on our health holistically. As you say, sleep, managing stress, our fitness, the foods we eat, the relationships we have with people, the fact that we're not neurotic about our health choices also is beneficial. Laughter improves. I saw some research on laughter in the gut microbiome.
Yeah.
So laughter is the gut microbiome. So again, it's very amiss of us to say, I have the solution, just take my probiotics for 30 days, drink my kombucha for 30 days, and everything's going to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's so much more than that. It's just one component of it.
Yeah. The state of the 21st century, could be, like, just take this magic potion of X, and it will cure your gut microbiome, and then everything is going to be fine.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there's other things. That the whole body isn't just the microbiome.
Yeah. And the whole body is part of a larger ecosystem as well. So you've got to kind of even look at it as a whole environment and the ecosystem that we live in.
Yes.
So, Darryl, we're coming up on the end of the show, but there's just a couple of questions that I usually ask everyone that comes on the show. So, do you listen to podcasts yourself?
I do. I do listen to them, and especially in the part when I first started to get into this lifestyle, I spent a lot of time amassing as much information as possible, and it's definitely one of the best resources available to learn a lot more.
Yeah. I agree.
And so now I probably spend more time being a guest than listening.
Yeah.
But I also feel that when I do listen to a podcast or read a blog post, I try and have a takeaway, and I try to, it's so easy just to amass information and become like a walking encyclopedia who doesn't actually do anything. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I know how to fix my car, but I'm actually not going to get a spanner. I don't know where to buy a spanner from, I don't want to actually put any of this into practice.
Yeah.
So I feel that it's far more beneficial when you are listening to resources or reading information to actually start putting some of this into practice, because ultimately that's why we're doing this. We want to improve our health. We want to actually have some, implement some of what we know, put it into practice and see the results. So I'm trying to avoid information overload.
Okay. No, because I was just going to ask, because would love to know, like, if you had a recommendation for anyone of a podcast or a book, that maybe has sort of been inspiring for you, and Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I could pronounce the name, the author correctly. Yeah. So basically, it's a book called Sapiens, or Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. And the author is Yuval Noah Harari, and it's one of the most fascinating books. Talking about how we humans inhabited the Earth, Yep.
And how we succeeded as as human beings, and what our ancestors did in order to get here. And and it's very holistic. It doesn't, it's not just talking about one thing,
Yeah.
not just talking about food, say, it's talking about pretty much everything that involves, how we invent, our communication, whether it's our use of money, whether it's development of science. I mean, it really talks about pretty much our entire time on the planet, and thus developing into 21st century Homo sapiens. So that's my book, and if you could get him on as a guest,
oh wow,
that would be
amazing. That would be amazing. It's funny you mentioned that. I've had that book on my phone on the Audible for probably a couple of years now, and I haven't read it, but it's come up a couple of times recently, like people mentioning it. So I'm going to have to get to it. But I know it's really long. Like I think it's something like 15 hours on audiobook. I think it must be quite a thick book, is it?
It is quite a thick book, yeah. So I'm not sure how many words are in this book, but it is a very good book. It's very engrossing.
Amazing.
And you kind of think it just covers so much. It's incredible. It's an incredible amount of work done.
Beautiful. So probably everything that you need to know about humans is possibly in there in one place.
I reckon so. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, did you have a podcast recommendation, or if not, like that's cool.
As a guest, or as a podcast to listen to?
Yeah, as a podcast to listen to.
I would say,
there's so many, I know.
Probably, there are so many. Probably the Primal Blueprint.
Yeah.
So I think Mark Sisson and his approach is it's a very holistic one. It's based on these kind of ancestral primal principles, and he has a wide range of guests. So across the spectrum of health and well-being. So I would definitely recommend the Primal Blueprint podcast.
Okay, awesome. I'll put those two things in the show notes for everyone. So Darryl, the name of this show is Reconnected.me, and I explain it as knowing our true nature. Would love to know what being reconnected, or the term reconnected, means to you.
So I would say that it's trying to become more aligned with nature.
Yeah.
So so I think that's what, I have to recognize that I am nature.
Yeah.
That's
totally.
what I am.
Yeah.
And if I try and divorce myself from nature, if I try and deviate myself from nature's prescription, nature's way, then I'm more likely to suffer from chronic lifestyle disease. Yeah. I'm more likely to be disconnected with my peers and other human beings, and I'll be isolated. And so it's nature and I are one. There you go.
Love it. Love it. I totally agree. So for everyone out there, what are 3 things that you suggest people could do to reconnect?
Get outside and interact with nature. Appreciate nature and your environment. Secondly, reconnect with your heritage and ancestry, whatever that is. Think about, traditional foods that you were exposed to, and some traditional ways of living that you can take on board today. And the third would be just do. So take whatever knowledge you have that you know is beneficial to you, that you know is helpful to you, and put it into practice. Don't delay. Don't wait until it's potentially could be too late.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't do anything with it, it's kind of like, what's the point?
Exactly.
That knowledge is not power. It's actually potential power until you put it into action and you integrate, what it is in your life that you can. So yeah, definitely.
Yes, it's like a surgeon. It's like a lung cancer surgeon who smokes.
Yeah, yeah.
Who, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Tells their patients all the time, you have to give up smoking. It's bad for you. and then as soon as he's operated on another lung, cancer patient, he's back having a cigarette during his break.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what you know, it just matters what you put into place, what you put into practice.
Absolutely. So, Darryl, do you want to let everyone know, what are you currently working on? I know you've got your animal movement program, so maybe if you want to share a bit about that and maybe what you've got coming up later this year as well.
Yeah, so I've recently launched my 30-day Animal Moves Challenge, which is how you can get stronger and healthier and leaner in the next 30 days. And the whole premise of that is by training like an animal, like a series of animals, you then engage in lots of different movement patterns, and that will make you a stronger and healthier human, because you start engaging in all the movements that you should do to improve your health. And because it's a Primal Play program, it's also about having some fun and enjoyment and exploring what you're capable of in a natural environment, ideally. But it's accessible from anywhere and everywhere. And even though it is a 30-day course, it's an evergreen course. So basically you have lifetime access, and you can stop and start at any time. So that's called the 30-Day Animal Moves Challenge, and it's accessible from my website, primalplay.com. And probably the next bit of work that's going to be happening is I'll be launching the certification program for Primal Play. So I'll be training other trainers and coaches to use Primal Play in their world, and to get other people on board with this playful approach to movement.
Amazing.
So that's the kind of bit of work happening this year. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. We'll definitely put all that in the show notes, the information to that, the link to your website. But just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show, Darryl. It's been beautiful to talk with you and, for you to share your wisdom with everyone. So yeah, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. You've been a fantastic host, and thanks very much again for the invitation, Lucy.
No worries, it's a pleasure. So thank you everyone for listening, and as always you can find me at www.reconnected.me, and would absolutely love it if you're able to head on over to iTunes and leave a rating and review, and also subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if there's anyone in your life that you feel would benefit from hearing a conversation